Hello, and welcome back to Quiet Theories. Tonight, we're settling in for what might be our most ambitious discussion yet. We're going to explore every corner of Stranger Things, Season 5's finale predictions, unravelling theories, analysing character arcs, and piecing together what the Duffer Brothers might have in store for us when the final episode drops on New Year's Eve. There's an enormous amount to discuss tonight, so find your most comfortable position, adjust your pillows, and let's begin this journey together through the world of Hawkins, Indiana one last time. Before we dive into predictions about how everything ends, we need to establish exactly where the story stands right now. Understanding the current state of affairs is crucial for making informed guesses about what comes next, and honestly, these first 7 episodes have taken us on quite a ride. Stranger Things. Season 5 has employed an unusual release strategy for Netflix. Instead of dropping all episodes at once, or following a weekly release schedule, they've divided the season into 3 distinct volumes. Volume 1 arrived on November 26th, containing 4 episodes that set the stage for everything to follow. Volume 2 landed on Christmas Day with 3 additional episodes, pushing the narrative forward significantly. And now we're waiting for the finale, scheduled to release on December 31st, New Year's Eve. That timing feels intentional, doesn't it? There's something symbolic about ending this story on the cusp of a new year, a moment traditionally associated with fresh beginnings and closing chapters. Volume 1 established the situation in Hawkins with considerable weight. The fall of 1987 has arrived, and the town bears the visible scars from the 4-way gate split that occurred at the end of Season 4. The military has responded by placing the entire town under strict quarantine, and their primary objective seems to be hunting down Eleven with increasing aggression. This forces her back into hiding alongside Hopper, creating an interesting parallel to Season 1 where she was also living in secret, away from government eyes. It's almost as if the story has come full circle, returning to its roots before reaching its conclusion. But perhaps the most significant development in Volume 1 involves Will Byers finally stepping into his power. After 4 seasons of being a victim, of being connected to this nightmare against his will, Will has a moment in Episode 4 that changes everything. When the group finds themselves attacked by a swarm of Demogorgons, Will taps into latent abilities he's possessed all along and destroys them. The visual presentation of his powers bears a striking resemblance to how Vecna kills people, which creates this interesting duality of being both impressive and somewhat terrifying when you consider the implications. Will has been connected to the Upside Down since his kidnapping back in 1983, and we're finally seeing what that connection actually means. For him, in practical terms, it's not just about sensing when something is wrong or feeling the Mind Flayer's presence. He has actual offensive capabilities, psychic powers that can be weaponized against the creatures that have tormented him for so long. Volume 2 brought another crucial development for Will's character. The show has been hinting at his sexuality throughout multiple seasons, using subtle cues and implications, but Volume 2 made it explicit. Will came out to the group, finally speaking his truth aloud. Their reaction was everything he needed it to be. Complete acceptance, unwavering support, and genuine love from his friends. This moment matters for multiple reasons. On a personal level, it allows Will to stop hiding, to stop being afraid, but it also has strategic implications for the final battle. Vecna has been using Will's sexuality against him, showing him visions, threatening to expose him in cruel ways. By coming out on his own terms, Will removes that power from Vecna's hands. He's no longer vulnerable to that particular form of manipulation, which means he can tap into the hive mind to help Eleven without fear holding him back. Then there's Carly's return, which honestly caught many viewers off guard. Cali, also known as 8 or Eero 8, was introduced back in Season 2 in that controversial episode titled The Lost Sister. It's Episode 7 of that season, and it remains one of the most divisive episodes in the entire series. The episode pulled Eleven away from Hawkins completely, following her to Chicago, where she discovered Cali and her gang of misfits who were using Carly's illusion powers to exact revenge on people who had wronged them. At the time, the fan reaction was overwhelmingly negative. Viewers felt like the episode broke the momentum of the season at a critical juncture when things were getting intense back in Hawkins. It felt like filler content, like a backdoor pilot for a spin-off series that nobody had requested. The pacing seemed off. The tone didn't quite match the rest of the season, and it just felt like this strange detour that most people wanted to forget about as quickly as possible. But it turns out the Duffer Brothers were playing a much longer game than anyone realised. That episode wasn't filler at all. It was setup, careful preparation for Season 5. In Volume 1, when Eleven and Hopper infiltrate what they believe to be Vecna's base in the Upside Down, they're expecting a confrontation with Henry Creel. They're prepared for a fight with the season's primary antagonist. Instead, they discover a military facility, part of Dr. K's operation, and inside that facility, hooked up to machines and IVs, is Cali. She's been imprisoned there for months, possibly longer. The military found her after her friends were killed. She attempted to resist, tried to escape, but they possess technology that suppresses psychic abilities. She was essentially helpless against their superior resources and preparation. What happened to her during that imprisonment is genuinely horrific. They were harvesting her blood continuously, draining it, storing it, processing it for experiments. Kaylee didn't understand why at first, but during one escape attempt, she discovered the terrible truth. They were transfusing her blood into pregnant women. The military was attempting to create more powered individuals, trying to manufacture an army of psychics, using Cali as the source material. It's the same program that originally created Henry Creel decades earlier, the same experiments that led to Eleven's birth, the same cycle of exploitation and weaponization that's been operating since at least the 1950s. Vecna himself has been actively working toward his goals. He successfully kidnapped 12 children to use as vessels for his plan. These kids are trapped in his mindscape, which they're calling Kamazots, and they're being used to amplify his power so he can merge the abyss with our world. Among the kidnapped children is Derek, who underwent an interesting transformation from being an obnoxious bully character to actually becoming quite likeable as the season progressed, and Holly Wheeler, who has a substantially larger role this season than anyone anticipated based on her minimal presence in previous seasons. Max Mayfield also wakes up during this volume, and this time it's real, not another fake out like we experienced earlier. She's trapped in Kamazots along with Holly, and the two of them spend a significant portion of Volume 2 trying to escape, exploring this nightmarish dreamscape that Vecna controls. It's a psychological prison, a place where reality bends according to his will, and escaping proves far more difficult than simply finding a door and walking through it. Volume 2 delivered some massive revelations about the nature of the Upside Down itself. Dustin discovers Dr. Brenner's hidden journals and figures out something that completely changes our understanding of the show's mythology. The Upside Down isn't actually another dimension at all. It's a wormhole, a bridge between our world and something else entirely. This revelation recontextualizes literally everything we thought we knew about the supernatural elements of the show. By the end of episode 7, which carries the title The Bridge, everyone has finally assembled in one location there, calling the right side up. They've formulated a plan to stop Vecna, rescue the kidnapped children, and collapse the wormhole permanently. Eleven and Kaylee are going to launch a coordinated psychic assault on Vecna. Steve has identified a path to the abyss. Dustin wants to bomb the exotic matter sphere to destroy the bridge, connecting the dimensions. It's classic Stranger Things methodology, really. A complicated plan with multiple moving parts that will probably encounter complications in at least 3 different ways. But the most heartbreaking moment came in a conversation between Cali and Eleven. Cali essentially told her that the only way to stop the government from continuing to create powered weapons is for both of them to die, to sacrifice themselves by staying in the Upside Down when it collapses. At the end of episode 7, there's this look exchange between them, and it seems like Eleven might have agreed to this plan. So even if they achieve victory against Vecna, we might lose her in the process. That's where we stand heading into the finale. The stage is set, the teams are assembled, and the stakes have never been higher. Now let's talk about one of the most mind-bending revelations in the entire series, because it turns out Everything we thought we knew about the Upside Down was fundamentally wrong. In Volume 2, Dustin Henderson makes his way into the Upside Down's version of Hawkins' lab. He's exploring the facility, probably terrified out of his mind, when he discovers a hidden room that Dr. Brenner kept secret. Inside, he finds Dr. Brenner's secret journals. These aren't just casual notes or standard documentation. They're detailed scientific records about the experiments Brenner was conducting, the nature of the Upside Down, and most importantly, what actually happened the night 11 opened the first gate back in 1983. What Dustin discovers in these journals completely recontextualizes the entire mythology of Stranger Things from the ground up. The Upside Down, that dark mirror version of Hawkins we've been visiting since Season 1, isn't actually another dimension. It's not a parallel world that exists alongside ours in some kind of multiverse configuration. Instead, it's a wormhole, a bridge between two distinct points in space and time, connecting our world to something else entirely. Breaking down the science for the group in his characteristically enthusiastic way, Dustin explains that there are actually three distinct things at play in this cosmology. First, there's our world, Earth, the reality we know and understand. Second, there's the Upside Down, which is the bridge, the connection, the passage between worlds. And third, there's the Abyss, which is the actual other dimension that the bridge connects to. The Abyss is described as this desolate, red, Mars-like landscape where the real horrors originate. It's the home of the Demogorgons, the source of the Mind Flayer particles, and the place where Henry Creel has been trapped since 11, banished him as a child. Interestingly, in the Duffer Brothers' early planning documents, they didn't call it the Abyss. They called it Dimension X, which is a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The name the Abyss comes from Dungeons and Dragons lore, specifically referring to the plane of chaos and evil. Dustin, being the massive nerd that he is, names it after the D&D realm when he's explaining everything to the group, and honestly, it fits pretty perfectly. So here's how the actual mechanics work, according to what Dustin pieced together from Brenner's journals. Back in the 1950s, young Henry Creel was already a powerful psychic. Dr. Brenner eventually got his hands on Henry and began experimenting on him at Hawkins' lab. When Henry revealed his true nature and killed a bunch of people in a violent rampage, 11 was the only one strong enough to stop him. She used her powers to banish him, essentially ripping him out of our dimension entirely. Henry was sent to the Abyss, that horrible red wasteland where he's been ever since. But Dr. Brenner didn't just let Henry disappear into the unknown. He wanted to find him, to study him, to maybe even bring him back under control for further experimentation. So Brenner forced young 11 into the sensory deprivation tank, what they called the bath, and made her search for Henry across dimensions. When 11 finally made psychic contact with Henry in the Abyss, something extraordinary and terrible happened simultaneously. The connection between them, the sheer power of their psychic bond, created a stable wormhole. That wormhole is what we've been calling the Upside Down this entire time. The Upside Down isn't its own world with its own history and development. It's basically a pocket dimension, a tunnel that Henry and his monsters have been using to cross back into Hawkins. This explains why the Upside Down looks like Hawkins frozen on November 6th, 1983. That's the night 11 made contact. That's the night the bridge was formed. The Upside Down isn't evolving or changing because it's not a living place. It's a snapshot, a doorway, a passage between our reality and Henry's prison. What's truly wild about this revelation is how much it changes our understanding of literally everything that's happened throughout the series. Every time we thought creatures were coming from the Upside Down, they were actually coming from the Abyss, just using the Upside Down as a highway, a convenient passage between dimensions. Every time a gate opened, it wasn't opening to the Upside Down itself as a destination. It was opening the bridge wider, making it easier for things to cross over from the Abyss into our world. The Mind Flayer, the Demogorgons, the Demodogs, the Demobats, all of it originates from that red hellscape where Henry has been building his army for decades. The Upside Down is just the road they travel on to reach Hawkins. Dustin also figures out what that massive sphere of energy is, that Nancy shot at in an earlier episode. They thought it might be some kind of shield generator, like the Death Star's protective barrier in Return of the Jedi, but it's not defensive technology at all. It's a massive exotic matter, the same theoretical substance that's used to stabilise wormholes in cutting-edge physics. The sphere is basically the anchor point, the thing keeping the bridge open and stable between dimensions, which means if they can destroy it, they can collapse the wormhole entirely. The Duffer Brothers have confirmed in various interviews that they wrote a 20-page mythology document back when they first pitched the show to Netflix. It detailed exactly what the Upside Down was, where it came from, and how it all connected to the larger story they wanted to tell. They've been holding on to this information for years, waiting for exactly the right moment to reveal it. Honestly, I hadn't realised the show's cosmology was this carefully planned from the very beginning, but apparently it was all there in that document from day one. This revelation is absolutely massive, because it means defeating Vecna isn't sufficient on its own. They need to collapse the bridge itself, cut off the abyss from Earth permanently, or nothing they do will matter in the long run. The monsters will keep coming, the gates will keep opening. The threat will remain as long as that connection exists. And speaking of things that need to happen for the plan to work, we need to talk about what might be the most heartbreaking conversation in Volume 2. Because Cali laid out a scenario that nobody wanted to hear, a truth that's difficult to accept, but impossible to ignore. After Eleven and Hopper rescue Cali from the military's upside-down base, Carly fills Eleven in on what's been happening to her during her imprisonment. Once her friends were killed and she was captured, she was taken to this facility and hooked up to machines. Doctors continuously drew her blood, storing it, processing it, using it for purposes she didn't initially understand. Carly fought back at one point and nearly escaped during the chaos. That's when she discovered the truth about what they were doing with her blood. It was being transfused into pregnant women. The military was attempting to create more people with powers using Cali as the source material, trying to manufacture psychic abilities in a new generation. It's the same program that created Henry Creel in the first place, back in the 1950s. The same experiments that led to Eleven's birth decades later. The same cycle of exploitation and weaponization that's been going on for over 30 years at minimum. Dr. Brenner ran the program for decades until his death. When he died, someone else took over the reins. Now it's Dr. K, played by Linda Hamilton, who's running the operation. And if Dr. K dies or gets arrested, someone else will inevitably replace her. The program never ends. It just changes hands, continues. Under new management, adapts to new circumstances. Carly explains all of this to Eleven in a scene that's honestly devastating to watch. She's not angry exactly, not raging against the injustice. She's resigned, almost calm in her acceptance. She's accepted the reality of what they are to people in power, what they represent to institutions and governments. They're not people in the eyes of the government, they're weapons, they're resources. They're the key to creating armies of superpowered soldiers who could change the balance of global power. Then Carly gets to the point, the terrible conclusion she's reached. She tells Eleven that the only way to stop the cycle is for both of them to die. Not just defeat Vecna and close the gates. Not just destroy the lab and expose the program. Actually die, physically cease to exist. Remove themselves from the equation permanently so their blood can't be harvested anymore. So the experiments can't continue using them as templates. Carly's exact words are something along the lines of, "Don't you see, Jane? It's a cycle. A terrible, vicious cycle that feeds on itself. But we can stop it tonight, end it forever. After we kill Henry, after the children are rescued and brought to safety, we don't leave with the others. We stay on the bridge. When the Upside Down vanishes, so will we. It is the only way, Jane, the only way to truly end this." The conversation gets interrupted by Murray before Eleven can fully respond to this proposal, so we don't actually know for certain whether Eleven agreed to this plan or not. But at the end of episode 7, there's this moment that suggests something significant. The group is loading into trucks, heading out for the final mission. Mike asks Eleven if she's ready for what's coming. She says yes. And then she looks at Carly and gives her this tiny nod, just a subtle look between them, but it seems to confirm something unspoken. An agreement, an understanding, a shared commitment to do what needs to be done. Ross Duffer said in an interview that there's a sense of dread and uncertainty that pervades the end of that episode. Even if they succeed in defeating Vecna, there's a massive question mark about what happens to Eleven afterward, whether she'll actually go through with sacrificing herself for the greater good. What's really interesting from a narrative perspective is that earlier in Volume 2, Mike has this beautiful conversation with Eleven about the future. He talks about moving somewhere together after all this is over, somewhere peaceful with at least one waterfall. It's this beautiful, hopeful vision of a normal life they could have together, just the two of them, away from all the monsters and the government surveillance and the constant danger that's defined their entire relationship. But that conversation now feels like tragic foreshadowing, like maybe Mike is dreaming of a future that can't happen, imagining a life together that circumstances won't allow. The waterfall represents everything they've never had: peace, stability, normalcy, a chance to just be two people in love without the weight of the world on their shoulders. To be honest, I don't know if the Duffer brothers will actually go through with killing Eleven. It feels too obvious in some ways, too expected. The show has been building toward this kind of sacrifice since season 1, when Eleven seemingly died killing the Demogorgon. We've seen her willing to give everything for her friends over and over again throughout the series. Her powers have always taken a physical toll on her body. The nosebleeds, the exhaustion, the way using her abilities drains her life force. Brenner's ominous statement in season 2 that her powers would eventually kill her. It's all been pointing toward this outcome for years, but at the same time it's so obvious that it might be a misdirection. Stranger Things loves to set up expectations and then subvert them in clever ways. Maybe Eleven agrees to the plan, but someone else sacrifices themselves instead at the last moment. Maybe they find another way to break the cycle that Cali hasn't considered. Maybe Cali is wrong about the necessity of their deaths, and there's a solution that involves exposing the program publicly or destroying it from within. The other possibility is that Eleven does sacrifice herself, but not permanently. She could get trapped in the Upside Down when it collapses, existing in some kind of limbo state between dimensions, or she could lose her powers but survive as a normal person. There are ways to have her make the sacrifice without it being a literal death, ways to honour the thematic requirement while still allowing her to live. What makes this setup so effective and so painful is that Kaylee's logic is completely sound. As long as Eleven and Cali exist, as long as their blood can be harvested and studied and weaponized, the cycle will continue indefinitely. Defeating Vecna solves the supernatural threat, closes the immediate danger. But the human threat, the military and the government experiments, that doesn't end unless the source material is gone forever. So the question heading into the finale isn't just, will they defeat Vecna? It's, at what cost? And can Eleven really walk away from this? Or will saving the world require losing herself in the process? But Eleven isn't the only character whose arc is reaching its culmination in this finale. Let's talk about Will Byers, because after 4 seasons of being the victim, of being connected to this nightmare against his will, his story is finally coming full circle in a way that feels both satisfying and bittersweet. Will's journey has been at the absolute heart of Stranger Things since the very first episode. He was the boy who vanished, the one who got dragged into the Upside Down, and came back fundamentally changed. Ever since his rescue in season 1, he's had this connection to the Upside Down that nobody fully understood, not even Will himself. He could sense the mind flayer in season 2, feel when it was close, when it was angry, when it was planning something. The back of his neck would tingle, and he'd just know, instinctively, that something was wrong. In season 2, Will was basically being used as a spy by the mind flayer without his knowledge or consent. He was possessed, certainly, but even after the possession ended, through Joyce's intervention, the connection remained intact. He'd have these episodes where he'd sort of zone out, lose time, and during those periods, he was tapping into the hive mind without realising what was happening. Vecna was using him, manipulating him, having him dig out an entire tunnel system under Hawkins while he slept, while he had no conscious awareness of what his body was doing. That's one of the big reveals from Volume 2 that recontextualizes Will's role in previous seasons. Vecna calls Will his builder. Because all those tunnels from Season 2, the ones that damaged the pumpkin patches and created underground passageways for the demodogs, Will made those. Not consciously, not willingly, but he constructed them nonetheless. He was using the vines, the organic matter of the Upside Down, to construct infrastructure for Vecna's monsters. It gave the demodogs faster routes to their targets, allowed them to move through Hawkins unseen. It spread corruption through the town's foundation, weakening the barriers between dimensions. And Will had no idea he was doing any of it. He thought he was just having blackouts, missing time, experiencing after effects from his possession. That reveal is honestly pretty tragic when you think about the psychological impact. Will has spent years feeling guilty about being connected to the Upside Down, feeling like he's somehow tainted or dangerous, and now he finds out he was actively helping the bad guys, even if it was completely against his will. That's a heavy burden to carry, but in Season 5, Will finally takes control of that connection that's haunted him for so long. In Episode 4, when the group is surrounded by a swarm of demogorgons with no apparent escape route, Will taps into his powers deliberately for the first time. He reaches into the hive mind consciously and just destroys them, completely obliterates them with psychic force. The visual presentation is striking and more than a bit terrifying because it looks remarkably similar to how Vecna kills people. Same kind of psychic energy, same force, same destructive power, just directed at monsters instead of humans. It raises interesting questions about the nature of these abilities and whether Will could potentially hurt people if he chose to. What's really interesting from a thematic perspective is how this power reveal connects to Will's other big moment this season, his coming out. The show has been hinting at Will's sexuality since basically the beginning of the series. Mike's obliviousness in Seasons 3 and 4 to Will's feelings. Will's clear romantic interest that he couldn't express. The way he looked at Mike when Mike wasn't watching. It was all there. Communicated through subtext and implication, and Volume 2 finally makes it explicit and undeniable. Will tells the group the truth before the final mission. He's scared because Vecna has been using his sexuality against him in their psychic connection, showing him visions, threatening to expose him in cruel ways, exploiting his deepest vulnerability. But Will decides to be brave, to own his truth regardless of the consequences. He tells everyone who he is, and their reaction is exactly what he needed. Complete support, no judgment whatsoever. Just love and acceptance from his friends, the people who matter most to him. I genuinely love that the show finally addressed this directly instead of just implying it forever. And what makes it even more powerful is that by coming out, by refusing to be ashamed of who he is, Will removes Vecna's power over him in that specific way. He's no longer afraid of what Vecna knows about him, which means he can tap into the hive mind to help 11 without that fear holding him back or creating a vulnerability that Vecna can exploit. He's emotionally stronger now, more integrated, more whole as a person. Noah Schnapp said in an interview that he read the scripts up through Episode 6, and he kept thinking, okay, so Will's coming out scene isn't here yet. It must be in Episode 7 or in the finale. He wanted to know when it would happen so he could prepare for it emotionally, give it the weight and authenticity it deserved. So heading into the finale, Will is probably one of the most important pieces on the board strategically. He can communicate with 11 while she's in Camazotz, serve as a relay point between the physical and psychic battles. He can potentially sense what Vecna is planning before it happens. He might even be able to disrupt Vecna's control over the 12 children who are being used as vessels. His connection to the Upside Down, the thing that's been a curse for so long, might actually be the key to winning this war. Will's arc from victim to hero feels like it's building to something major, something that will define who he becomes afterward. Whether that means he sacrifices himself heroically, or whether he survives and finally gets to just be a normal kid for once, exploring who he is without constant danger, we'll find out soon enough. But his journey has been one of the most compelling in the entire series. Now, speaking of characters making unexpected returns, we need to talk about someone I honestly wasn't sure we'd ever see again. Because Kaylee's comeback in Volume 1 was one of the most shocking moments of this season. Cali, also known as 8 or Zola 8, was introduced way back in Season 2 in an episode called The Lost Sister. It's episode 7 of that season, and it remains probably the most divisive episode in the entire series even years later. The episode takes Eleven away from Hawkins completely, following her to Chicago where she finds Cali and her gang of misfits. They're running around using Cali's illusion powers to get revenge on people who wronged them, targeting former Hawkins lab employees. At the time, fans absolutely hated that episode almost universally. I remember the reactions online being overwhelmingly negative. People felt like it broke the momentum of the season right when things were getting incredibly intense back in Hawkins. It felt like filler content, like a backdoor pilot for a spin-off show that nobody had asked for. The pacing was off compared to the rest of the season. The tone didn't quite match the established atmosphere. It was just this weird detour that most people wanted to forget about as quickly as possible. But it turns out the Duffer Brothers were playing an extremely long game. That episode wasn't filler at all, despite how it felt at the time. It was careful setup for Season 5, planting seeds that would bloom years later. In Volume 1, Eleven and Hopper infiltrate what they think is Vecna's base in the Upside Down. They're expecting a confrontation with Henry Creel, ready for a fight with the season's primary antagonist. Instead, they find a military facility, part of Dr. K's operation, that's been running in secret, and inside that facility, hooked up to machines and IVs, barely conscious, is Cali. She's been a prisoner there for months, maybe even longer. The military found her after her friends were killed in Chicago. She tried to resist when they came for her, tried to use her powers to escape, but they have technology that suppresses psychic abilities, equipment specifically designed to neutralize people like her. She was basically helpless against their superior preparation and resources. What happened to her during that imprisonment is genuinely horrific to contemplate. They were harvesting her blood constantly, draining it on a regular schedule, storing it in refrigerated containers, using it for experiments she wasn't informed about. Cali didn't know why they wanted her blood specifically at first, what made it so valuable to them, but during one escape attempt where she managed to get further than before, she discovered the terrible truth. They were transfusing her blood into pregnant women in a separate wing of the facility. The military was trying to create more powered individuals, attempting to manufacture psychic abilities in unborn children, trying to build an army of Kayleys and Elevens who would be under government control from birth. Kaylee's powers are different from Eleven's in interesting ways. She can create illusions, make people see things that aren't there, manipulate perception and sensory input. It's basically telepathy focused on vision and sensory manipulation rather than physical telekinesis. She can make herself invisible to observers. She can make threats appear out of nowhere, create entire scenarios that feel completely real. She can drive people mad with false visions that they can't distinguish from reality. In the right hands, or perhaps more accurately in the wrong hands, it's an incredibly dangerous ability for psychological warfare and intelligence operations. The Duffer Brothers brought Kaylee back because they needed to show the dual threat that's been present throughout the entire series from the beginning. There's the supernatural threat, which is Vecna, and the creatures from the abyss, the monsters, and the dimensional invasion. But there's also the human threat, equally dangerous in its own way. The government, the military, the people who see powered individuals as weapons to be controlled rather than people to be protected. Ross Duffer said in an interview that this dual threat has been there since Season 1, woven into the show's DNA. Dr. Brenner was the face of it initially, the scientist willing to do anything in pursuit of knowledge and power. Then he died and got replaced by someone else. The program continued under new management. The exploitation continued without interruption, and it will keep continuing indefinitely unless something fundamental changes about the system itself. That's why Cali represents a more pessimistic worldview compared to Mike's optimism about happy endings and peaceful futures. She's seen firsthand that defeating the monster isn't enough to solve the problem. The system that creates monsters, that exploits vulnerable people, that turns children into weapons will just make more unless it's destroyed completely. And destroying a system is much harder than killing a monster. The production team managed to keep Kaylee's return completely secret, despite Linnea Berthelsen being on set for months of filming. That's pretty impressive, given how much Stranger Things gets photographed by paparazzi and eagle-eyed fans who track every detail. In the finale, Cali and Eleven are planning to launch a coordinated psychic assault on Vecna. Cali will use her illusion powers to confuse and disorient him, make him question what's real, break his concentration during the crucial ceremony. While he's confused and vulnerable, Eleven hits him with raw telekinetic force, the same power she used to banish him as a child, but stronger now, more controlled, refined, through years of practice. It's the kind of teamwork that could actually work, assuming they both survive long enough to execute the plan and nothing goes catastrophically wrong in the meantime, while Eleven and Cali are preparing for their assault in the psychic realm. There's another mission that's just as critical to the overall success of the operation, because Max and Holly are trapped in something truly nightmarish, and getting them out safely won't be easy by any means. Max Mayfield has been in a coma since the end of Season 4, trapped in this liminal state between life and death. Vecna killed her technically, stopped her heart. Her bones were broken, her body was shattered, and she was clinically dead for over a minute before Eleven brought her back through sheer force of will. But bringing her back didn't mean she was okay, didn't restore her to health. She's been comatose, trapped somewhere between life and death for months, neither fully present nor fully gone. In Volume 1, we got a fake out where it seemed like she was waking up, her eyes opening, giving everyone hope. But it turned out to be Vecna manipulating things from within the mindscape, creating a false awakening. Finally, in Volume 2, Max actually wakes up for real this time, no tricks or deceptions, except she's not in a hospital bed in Hawkins. She's not in the physical world at all. She's in Camazotz, which is what they're calling Vecna's mindscape, his psychological prison. It's this place where Vecna has trapped the minds of his victims and his vessels, keeping them locked away while he uses their power. The place looks like a twisted version of the Creel house, Henry's childhood home, but wrong in subtle ways, distorted. Everything is slightly off in that way that dreams can be deeply unsettling even when nothing overtly scary is happening. The proportions are wrong, the shadows fall incorrectly, the architecture doesn't quite make sense when you look at it too closely. Holly Wheeler is there too, which honestly surprised a lot of people who expected her to remain a minor background character. Holly is Mike and Nancy's little sister, and in previous seasons she's been pretty much exactly that, a background character. Just a little kid who occasionally notices weird things happening but doesn't really factor into the main plot in any significant way. But this season, she has a much larger role than anyone anticipated. She gets kidnapped by Vecna and becomes one of his 12 vessels, one of the children he's using to amplify his power. Nell Fisher plays Holly in Season 5, and apparently Matt Duffer spotted her in just the trailer for Evil Dead Rise and thought she looked perfect for the role. When she came into audition, she blew them away with her performance, and Matt got to brag that he'd identified her early as perfect casting, though Ross Duffer jokes that they would have found her anyway through the normal casting process. In Camazotz, Max and Holly attempt multiple escapes. They explore this nightmare realm together, looking for a way out, some kind of exit or weakness in Vecna's control, and they discover something interesting during their exploration. There's a cave within the mindscape, a dark, ominous cave that seems to terrify Vecna in some way. Its presence disturbs him, creates a blind spot in his awareness. Holly theorizes that the cave represents a traumatic memory that Henry is trying to avoid, something from his past, that he's buried deep in his subconscious and doesn't want to confront. Some event or realization that's so painful or shameful that he's walled it off even from himself. Max thinks they should wait in the cave for rescue, that it's the safest place to hide since Vecna seems reluctant to enter it or even look at it too closely. But Holly's more proactive in her thinking. She wants to find their own way out rather than waiting passively for someone else to save them. What makes their situation even more disturbing is the other children trapped there with them. The 12 kids that Vecna kidnapped are all present in Camazotz, but they're not themselves anymore. They're not scared kids looking for escape routes. They're acting like they're in some kind of cult, completely brainwashed. vacant eyes, synchronized movements, speaking in unison sometimes, completely under Vecna's control. At one point, these children actually attack Holly when she tries to talk to them about escaping. Not even Derek, who becomes sort of an ally to Holly earlier, stands up for her when the others turn violent. It's genuinely creepy watching these kids who should be scared and trying to escape together, instead acting as extensions of Vecna's will. I found this whole sequence pretty disturbing, honestly. The idea of children being mentally enslaved and weaponized is rough content to process, and the fact that their physical bodies are also at risk makes it worse. Their minds are trapped in camazots, but their bodies are somewhere in the actual upside down, probably at the Creel house, or very near it, which means the rescue team needs to extract their bodies before Dustin's plan to bomb the exotic matter sphere goes into effect. Because if those bodies are still in the upside down when the wormhole collapses, the children will be lost forever, trapped in a dying dimension or pulled into the abyss. At the end of episode 7, we see Vecna gathering all 12 children in the Creel house for what appears to be a ceremony or ritual. He's preparing for whatever spell or process he needs to merge the worlds, to bring the abyss into our reality. The children hold hands around a table while Henry lights candles with deliberate ritualistic movements. Then their eyes roll back in their heads, going completely white, showing only the sclera. It's the beginning of whatever Vecna needs to do to merge the dimensions, and Holly's mind is still trapped there with them, experiencing it all. Rescuing Holly and the other kids before the wormhole collapses is absolutely critical to the success of the overall mission. Otherwise, they'll be lost forever, casualties of the very plan meant to save the world. You can't talk about the finale without discussing Dr. K in depth, because in some ways she might be more dangerous than Vecna himself. Not in terms of immediate threat or supernatural power, but in terms of what she represents and what will persist even after the monsters are defeated. Dr. K is played by Linda Hamilton, which is absolutely perfect casting when you think about it for more than a moment. The woman who played Sarah Connor, who fought against machines trying to wipe out humanity in the Terminator films, is now playing someone who wants to weaponize children with superpowers. There's something deeply ironic about that reversal. Linda Hamilton has said in interviews that she's a massive fan of Millie Bobby Brown, which makes their antagonistic relationship on screen even more interesting to watch unfold. Dr. K is the current head of the military operation in Hawkins. After the gates split the town open at the end of Season 4, creating that massive four-way rift, the government placed the entire area under military quarantine. Officially, it's for safety reasons, to protect people from the environmental hazards and strange occurrences. Unofficially, it's to control access to the site and continue their experiments away from public scrutiny and oversight. Dr. K is running the show now, and her primary objective is crystal clear. Capture 11 alive and intact. Unlike Dr. Brenner, who had this sort of twisted paternal relationship with his subjects, calling 11 his daughter and claiming to care about her well-being even as he exploited her, Dr. K is cold and ruthless in a more honest way. She's a true believer in what she's doing, convinced that creating powered individuals is necessary for national security or whatever justification helps her sleep at night. But there's no pretense of care, no manipulation disguised as love or concern. She sees 11 as an asset, a resource, the most valuable weapon on the planet that's currently not under her control. What makes Dr. K so dangerous is that she's not working alone and she's not operating on emotion or impulse. This is a systematic, well-funded institutional program with decades of momentum behind it. When Cali was imprisoned in the Upside Down facility, Dr. K had her hooked up to sophisticated medical equipment. The blood harvesting wasn't crude or improvised. It was precise, medical, optimized for maximum extraction with minimal damage to the subject. The transfusions into pregnant women were carefully monitored with full medical protocols. This is a woman who runs her operations with military efficiency and scientific precision. The experiments haven't been producing the desired results yet, apparently. Whatever they're doing with Carly's blood isn't creating the kind of powers they want in the children being born. That's why Dr. K is so desperate to get her hands on 11 specifically. 11 is the gold standard in their eyes, the most powerful psychic they've ever encountered, perhaps the most powerful that's ever existed. If they can study her, harvest her blood and tissue samples, maybe even extract her DNA and clone her, they could theoretically create an entire army of 11s who would be under government control from birth. I think Dr. K is scarier than most of the monsters we've seen on this show when you really think about the implications. The Demogorgons are animals operating on instinct. The Mind Flayer is an alien intelligence incomprehensible in its motivations. Vecna is a person twisted by trauma and power, understandable even if monstrous. But Dr. K represents something more insidious and harder to fight. She represents a system, a machine, an institution that will continue regardless of who's running it at any given moment. That's the point Cali was making to 11 in their conversation. It doesn't matter if they kill Vecna and close the gates. It doesn't matter if they destroy this particular lab and expose this specific operation. As long as 11 and Cali are alive, someone will come for them. Dr. K will be replaced by another scientist, another general, another bureaucrat who sees powered individuals as tools rather than people. The program has been running since at least the 1950s with Henry Creel. It survived Brenner's death without even pausing. It'll survive Dr. K's defeat just as easily. In Volume 2, 11 and Hopper managed to knock Dr. K unconscious during their escape from the base, but she's still out there somewhere, still hunting, still planning. And even if they defeat Vecna and close the Upside Down permanently, the military threat remains unchanged. Unless Cali and 11 remove themselves from the equation entirely through death, that threat never ends. That's the true horror at the heart of Stranger Things. Vecna is the immediate threat, the monster they can fight with powers and plans and courage. But Dr. K and what she represents, that's a threat that doesn't end with a battle. It only ends with sacrifice or systemic change that seems impossible. But let's talk about Vecna himself for a while, because after all these seasons of mystery and revelation, we finally know exactly what he's trying to accomplish. Henry Creel, also known as One, also known as Vecna, has been the big bad of Stranger Things since his reveal in Season 4. But his plan has always been somewhat murky, communicated through cryptic statements and symbolic imagery. We knew he wanted to reshape the world somehow, to transform reality according to his vision. We knew he hated humanity for reasons rooted in his childhood and psychology. We knew he was connected to the Upside Down and the Mind Flayer in ways that weren't entirely clear. But the specifics of his endgame remained unclear until now. In Season 5, it all becomes explicit and undeniable. Vecna's goal is to merge the Abyss with Earth, not just open gates between them, not just create passages that allow creatures to cross over. He wants to actually combine the two realities into one, permanently fusing them together. He wants to bring that desolate red wasteland where he's been trapped for decades into our world, fundamentally altering the nature of a reality itself. It would be the end of the world as we know it, replaced by something twisted and nightmarish under his absolute control. To accomplish this merger of dimensions, Vecna needs power on a scale he doesn't possess on his own. A massive amount of psychic energy that goes beyond what one individual can generate. That's where the 12 children come in as crucial components of his plan. They're not just hostages or victims or bargaining chips. They're vessels, amplifiers, psychic batteries. By channeling his consciousness through them simultaneously, Vecna can multiply his power 12-fold. It's like creating a psychic array with each child acting as a node in a network that Vecna controls from the center. Why 12 specifically? The show hasn't explicitly stated the reason, but there's likely a ritual or magical significance to the number that resonates across multiple traditions. Dustin would probably connect it to Dungeons and Dragons lore or some occult numerology. 12 apostles, 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 hours on a clock, 12 months in a year. It's one of those numbers that shows up repeatedly in mystical and religious contexts across cultures. Whatever the metaphysical reason, Vecna needs exactly 12 children, no more and no fewer, and he's got them all now. At the end of episode 7, we see Vecna beginning the ceremony that will change everything. He's gathered all 12 children in the Creel house within Camazotz, seating them around a table in a precise configuration. They hold hands in a circle, creating an unbroken chain. Henry lights candles with ritual precision and tells them they are in a place where there are no monsters. Which is just... The irony is overwhelming. You are the monster, Henry. The lie is so blatant it's almost funny, except these kids are completely under his control and can't recognise the irony or the danger they are in. Then their necks crane backwards suddenly in an unnatural movement, their eyes rolling back until only the whites are showing. It's a deeply unsettling image that's hard to shake. The ceremony has begun, and Vecna's plan to merge the worlds is now in motion, counting down to an endpoint that will change everything. Jamie Campbell Bower, who plays Vecna through both performance capture and practical effects, said in interviews that viewers should be holding onto their chairs, particularly with what he's up to in Volume 2 and the finale. He described Volume 1 as an explosive setup for what continues to happen, building towards something even bigger. What's really interesting when you think about the timeline is that Vecna has been planning this for decades. He's been trapped in the abyss since the 1950s, when 11 banished him there as a child. That's approximately 30 years of isolation, of building his power, of learning to control the creatures native to that dimension. 30 years of waiting for the right moment to strike back at the world that rejected him, the family that feared him, the humans he despises. The gates that Vecna opened at the end of Season 4, the four-way split that tore through Hawkins like wounds in reality, those weren't random acts of destruction. They were preparation, careful groundwork, weakening the barrier between worlds, making it easier for the final merge to take place when the time came, and the timing matters significantly. The finale takes place right around the anniversary of Will's disappearance, November 6th. That date keeps coming back throughout the series, echoing through the seasons. It's when the first gate opened in 1983. It's when the Upside Down formed as a stable wormhole. There's a symmetry to it all that feels intentional, poetic in its circular structure. The Duffer Brothers have also confirmed that the finale will definitively answer the question of Vecna's connection to the Mind Flayer. That's been a lingering mystery since Season 4 raised more questions than it answered. Did Henry create the Mind Flayer from nothing? Did he find it in the abyss and form some kind of partnership with an existing entity? Is he controlling it, or is it controlling him? We'll finally get that answer on New Year's Eve. Vecna has everything he needs now at this point in the story. The vessels, the power, the ceremony underway. The only thing standing between him and the end of the world is our group of heroes with their complicated, probably going to go wrong in multiple ways, plan. So let's talk about that plan in detail, because it's ambitious to say the absolute least. By the end of episode 7, everyone has finally assembled at a location they're calling the right side up. It's basically the opposite of the upside down, a meeting point in the real world where they can coordinate their efforts before splitting into specialised teams. For the first time all season, the whole group is together in one place. Well, almost everyone. Holly, Derek, and the 12 kidnapped children are still trapped in Camazotz, their minds imprisoned while their bodies are held in the physical upside down. But everyone else, all the original characters we've been following for 5 seasons, plus the new additions, they're there together, ready for one last mission. The plan they've come up with is classic Stranger Things methodology. It's got multiple moving parts that have to coordinate perfectly, requires precise timing, and will probably go sideways in at least 3 different ways, but it's the best shot they've got. The only plan that addresses all the threats simultaneously. Team 1 is the Psychic Assault Squad. 11 and Cali will enter Camazotz together, through some form of psychic projection, leaving their bodies behind in a safe location while their consciousness travels into Vecna's mindscape. The idea is that Cali will use her illusion powers to disorient Vecna, make him see things that aren't real, break his concentration during the crucial ceremony. While he's confused and vulnerable, unable to distinguish reality from illusion, 11 hits him with everything she's got. Raw telekinetic force, the same power she used to banish him as a child, but stronger now, more controlled, refined through years of practice and desperation. If they can disrupt the ceremony and kill Vecna, the theory goes that the vessels will be freed automatically, their minds released from his control. The merge will fail, the dimensions will remain separate, and the immediate supernatural threat will be neutralized. Team 2 is the rescue squad, and their mission is possibly even more dangerous. Steve has identified something he's calling a beanstalk, which is apparently a path that leads directly from the upside down into the abyss itself. It sounds like something out of a fairy tale, honestly, like Jack and the Beanstalk made manifest. A massive organic structure, probably made of vines or tendrils or some combination of upside-down plant life that creates a passage between dimensions. The rescue team will use this path to reach the Creel house in Camazotz, extract Holly and the other children's physical bodies one by one, and get them to safety before the wormhole collapses. Team 3 is the demolition squad, and this is where Dustin's scientific knowledge becomes crucial. He's proposed bombing the exotic matter sphere that's stabilizing the wormhole between dimensions. If they can destroy it, the bridge between Earth and the abyss will collapse completely. The upside down will vanish like it never existed. Any creatures still inside when it collapses will be trapped in the abyss permanently, unable to cross over anymore. It's a permanent solution that cuts off the threat at its source, assuming the bomb actually works as theorized and they can get it into position without being stopped. The timing is absolutely critical to the success of all 3 missions. They need to rescue everyone before the wormhole collapses. If Holly and the kids are still in the upside down when Dustin detonates the bomb, they'll be lost forever, trapped in a collapsing dimension or pulled into the abyss along with everything else. So the rescue team has to move fast, extract every child, verify they have everyone, and signal the demolition team that it's safe to proceed. Any miscommunication or delay could be catastrophic. Of course, this all assumes nothing goes wrong along the way. And if we've learned anything from Stranger Things over 5 seasons, it's that plans never go perfectly. There's always a complication nobody anticipated, always something they didn't account for in their preparation. Maybe the military interferes. Dr. K showing up at the worst possible moment, trying to capture 11 even in the middle of the apocalypse. Maybe Vecna has a backup plan they don't know about, a contingency for exactly this scenario. Maybe the bomb doesn't work the way Dustin thinks it will, or the exotic matter sphere is more protected than they realized. Maybe one of the teams gets separated or trapped, unable to complete their part of the mission. Maybe someone gets left behind in the upside down when the wormhole starts collapsing, forcing an impossible choice. What's interesting is that past Stranger Things plans have often succeeded because someone had a hidden ace, an unexpected advantage that saved the day at the last second. Dustin and Susie knowing Planck's constant when nobody else could provide it, Hopper having a sword at the perfect moment. 11 showing up alive when everyone thought she was dead. There's usually some kind of surprise element that tips the scales toward victory at the crucial moment. Whether that happens this time or whether the cost of victory is too high, even if they technically win, we'll have to wait and see. But it's a solid plan on paper, as solid as anything could be under these circumstances. Defeat Vecna, psychically. Rescue the hostages, physically. Destroy the wormhole permanently. 3 teams, 3 objectives, all happening simultaneously during what's probably going to be the most intense sequence in the entire series. Which brings us to what everyone's actually been wondering about since the season started. Who's going to die? It's the question that's been hanging over this entire season like a dark cloud, creating anxiety and speculation in equal measure. The Duffer Brothers have been coy about it in interviews, which only makes people more anxious. Before Volume 1 even dropped, there were betting sites taking odds on which characters wouldn't make it to the end, Reddit threads full of detailed theories and predictions, Twitter polls asking who's most likely to sacrifice themselves. The speculation has been absolutely relentless across every social media platform. The thing about Stranger Things is that it usually kills off supporting characters rather than the core cast that we've followed from the beginning. Benny died in Season 1, Bob died in Season 2, Alexei and Billy died in Season 3, Eddie died in Season 4. But the main kids, the original party members who started this whole journey, They've all survived so far, against increasingly impossible odds. Even when it looked like 11 died at the end of Season 1, she came back alive. Even when Hopper seemingly died in Season 3, he survived in a Russian prison. The show protects its core characters, which sometimes makes the threat feel less real, less permanent. But this is the final season. The rules might be different now. The Duffer Brothers might be willing to make choices they wouldn't have made in earlier seasons, knowing there's no future storyline to protect these characters for. 11 is the obvious candidate for a heroic death, based purely on narrative setup. Her entire arc has been building towards sacrifice since the very beginning. In Season 1, she was willing to die to kill the Demogorgon, and she seemingly did die. Brenner warned her in Season 2 that her powers would eventually kill her, that the toll they take on her body is unsustainable. We've seen the physical cost they exact. The nosebleeds, the exhaustion, the way using them drains her life force visibly, and now Cowley has explicitly laid out a plan where 11 sacrifices herself to end the cycle of exploitation permanently. The setup is all there, carefully constructed over years. According to betting odds from various gambling sites, 11 is at 2-1 to die in the finale. That's the second highest odds of any character, indicating bookmakers think it's quite likely. One Reddit user wrote that they think 11 will die while trying to seal up the Upside Down, using too much power and kind of disintegrating with it as a final sacrifice. It would be poetic in many ways, bringing the story full circle. The girl who opened the first gate, being the one who closes it forever. The weapon who chooses to destroy herself rather than be used anymore. But here's the thing that gives me pause. It's so obvious that it might be a red herring. We're all expecting 11 to die now, based on the setup, which is exactly why the odds seem lower that she actually will. Stranger Things loves to subvert expectations, to set up what seems inevitable and then pull the rug out from under us. Maybe 11 agrees to the plan, fully intends to go through with it, but someone else sacrifices themselves instead at the crucial moment. Maybe Mike dies to protect or motivate her. Maybe Hopper takes her place, the father finally getting to truly save his daughter. The show could be setting up this obvious sacrifice just to pull a last-second substitution that hits even harder, because we weren't prepared for it. Will Byers is another strong candidate in some people's theories. Some fans predict that either Will or 11 will die, that the story demands one of them as payment for victory, and the way Will's powers mirror Vecna's killing method is suspicious when you think about it. In Episode 4, when Will destroyed those Demogorgons, it looks strikingly similar to Vecna's psychic attacks, the same visual language. There's this theory floating around that when Vecna and the Demogorgons are finally defeated by 11, Will might die at the same time, like his connection to the Upside Down is so deep and fundamental that severing it would kill him too. He's been a part of this for so long, since 1983, that maybe he can't exist separately from it anymore. But other fans disagree completely with this assessment. They argue that Will seems like the least likely to die, actually, when you consider his narrative arc. He's been the victim for 4 seasons straight, the one who suffers most consistently. Killing him now would feel cruel rather than heroic, punishment rather than sacrifice. His arc is about survival, about reclaiming his life after it was stolen from him, about finally getting to be himself without fear. Giving him a death instead of a future would undermine all of that character development, waste the journey we've watched him take. Mike Wheeler has surprisingly high betting odds at 7-2, which caught many people off guard. Some fans think he'll sacrifice himself to give 11 the motivation she needs to finally close the gate permanently. There's that scene in one of the trailers where Nancy appears to be washing blood off her hands, and people have speculated it might be Mike's blood on her skin. Plus, there's the waterfall conversation with 11 that feels like tragic foreshadowing. If Mike dies saving 11 or protecting the group, it would devastate her emotionally, but also potentially give her the strength to do what needs to be done, channel her grief into power. To be honest, I can't see them killing Mike despite the speculation. He's been the heart of the party since the beginning, the leader who holds everyone together. Finn Wolfhard has been there from the very start of the show. Killing him would fundamentally change what the show is at its core, removing a central pillar of the entire structure. Steve Harrington is the character everyone's most worried about, the one whose death would probably cause the biggest uproar online. His arc, from jerk to hero, is complete in many ways, beautifully executed over multiple seasons. He's had this wonderful relationship with Dustin that's evolved into something like a father figure or older brother dynamic. In Volume 2, there's that line where Steve and Dustin say, "You die, I die," to each other. That's ominous in television language. That sounds like foreshadowing, like the writers are preparing us for something terrible. They even have a physical fight in an episode called Shock Jock, because Dustin is terrified of losing Steve after already losing Eddie. Dustin breaks down crying, saying he can't lose another friend who dies trying to be a hero. He can't survive that kind of loss again. Steve hugs him and finally understands why Dustin has been so hostile and protective all season. It's a beautiful moment of reconciliation and mutual understanding, which in television language often means one of them is doomed. But would the show actually kill Steve after all this? The internet would absolutely riot. He's become such a beloved character that his death would hit harder than almost anyone else's. Maybe too hard for a show that's generally been more hopeful than tragic. Hopper has survived so many near-death experiences that he feels almost invincible at this point. He was in the explosion at the end of Season 3 and survived against all odds. He survived a Russian prison under brutal conditions. He's the dad character, the protector, the one who's already died once metaphorically. Killing him would be brutal, but it's possible. He might sacrifice himself so Eleven doesn't have to, the father finally getting to save his daughter in the most permanent way possible. The Duffer Brothers said in an interview with The Independent that they don't want to kill characters just for shock value or because people have a bloodlust for major deaths. They want deaths to serve the story and make sense for where the characters end up. That's somewhat reassuring, but it also means if someone does die, it'll be meaningful and emotionally devastating. Meaningful deaths hurt more because they feel earned. If we're being realistic though, Stranger Things has a clear pattern. They tend to kill off supporting characters rather than the core kids we followed from Season 1. So let's talk about who else might be at risk beyond the obvious candidates. Jonathan Byers is an interesting case that doesn't get discussed as much. Some fans think he'll sacrifice himself to save Will, which would be a very older brother thing to do, fitting his protective nature. There's also that shot in the trailer of Nancy with blood on her hands, and people have speculated it could be Jonathan's blood, but his betting. Odds are 13-2, which are actually pretty long. Based on that, Jonathan might be relatively safe, though the show could surprise us. Lucas Sinclair had people worried back in Season 4. There was this whole theory that he would bargain with God to switch places with Max, sacrificing himself to save her from her coma. The theory was based on the lyrics to Running Up That Hill, Kate Bush's song that became so iconic during that season, but Lucas made it through Season 4 intact, and his current odds are 8-1. Those are long enough that he's probably safe this time too, though nothing is certain in a final season. Nancy Wheeler is a wild card that's hard to predict. That blood on her hands in the trailer has to mean something significant. She's been in leadership roles throughout the series, always putting herself in danger to protect others. She could absolutely die in the finale, but the show hasn't really set up her death the way they've set up others. There's been no thematic preparation, no building sense of inevitable sacrifice. Robin Buckley feels safe, honestly. She's comedic relief in many ways, and those characters tend to survive in ensemble shows. Plus, her relationship with Steve is one of the show's best friendships, a highlight of the later seasons. Killing one without devastating the other would be difficult narratively, and killing both seems excessive and unnecessarily cruel. Murray Bauman is another comedic character who'll probably make it through. He's the one who interrupted Cali and Eleven's conversation about sacrifice, which feels more like a narrative function than a death flag. Murray has survived this long by being smart and resourceful, always finding angles others miss. I'd be surprised if he dies now. Joyce Byers is the mom, the protector, the emotional heart of the adult characters. Stranger Things doesn't usually kill the parents, and Joyce has been through enough trauma. Losing her would destroy Will and Jonathan. Psychologically, it feels unnecessarily cruel to kill the character who represents maternal love and protection so strongly. Dustin Henderson is probably safe because of his relationship with Steve and his function in the story. They've set up this fear that Dustin has about losing another friend after Eddie. That fear wouldn't be as impactful if Dustin himself dies, because he wouldn't be around to experience the loss. Plus, Dustin is the heart of the group in many ways, the glue that holds different factions together. Killing him would fundamentally change the dynamic in ways that would be hard to recover from narratively. Erica Sinclair is the youngest character still actively involved in the dangerous missions. She's Lucas's little sister, smart and sassy and brave beyond her years, but she's also still a kid. The show would have to go pretty dark to kill Erica, darker than it's ever gone before. I don't see it happening, but Cali is probably the most at risk of any supporting character based on narrative setup. She's explicitly laid out a plan where she dies alongside 11 to end the military exploitation permanently. She believes it's the only way to stop the cycle, and she's accepted her fate with a calmness that suggests she's made peace with it. And unlike 11, who we've been following since season 1 with years of emotional investment, Cali is still somewhat of an outsider. The audience likes her and respects her, but we don't have the same deep emotional connection. Her death would be tragic and meaningful without being completely devastating to the core fan base. If I had to guess based on narrative structure and thematic resonance, Cali is the most likely supporting character to die. Her sacrifice would complete her arc, protect 11 from having to go through with it alone, and solve the problem of the military threat in one stroke. It would hurt, but it would make sense narratively and emotionally. The question is whether the Duffer Brothers will be satisfied with just one death, or if they're planning something bigger. A massacre that fundamentally changes the landscape of the show in its final moments. Beyond deaths, let's talk about the plot twists nobody's expecting, because the Duffer Brothers love to subvert expectations, and I bet money they've got surprises planned that we haven't even considered yet. The most popular twist theory circulating online is that 11 doesn't actually die, at least not permanently. The show pulled this exact move in season 1, remember? She seemingly sacrificed herself killing the Demogorgon. Everyone thought she was dead, mourned her, and then she was alive in the finale. Could they do it again? It would be a direct parallel to the series premiere, bringing everything full circle in a very deliberate way. Maybe 11 gets sucked into the Upside Down when it collapses but survives in some kind of limbo state, trapped between dimensions. Or maybe she loses her powers, but lives as a normal person, which would be a sacrifice of a different kind. There are ways to have her make a sacrifice without it being a literal death, ways to honour the thematic requirement, while still allowing her to live and potentially have that peaceful future with Mike. What if someone else sacrifices themselves instead of 11? That would be the more unexpected twist. Honestly, we're all bracing for 11 to die because the setup is so obvious, so carefully constructed. But what if Mike throws himself into danger to save her at the last second? What if Hopper takes her place, the father finally getting to truly protect his daughter? The show has done this before, redirecting the expected tragedy onto a different character. It would hurt more because we wouldn't see it coming, wouldn't be emotionally prepared. There's also this theory about time manipulation that's been gaining traction. The Upside Down is frozen on November 6th, 1983. That's the night 11 made contact with Henry in the Abyss, the night the wormhole formed. The fact that it's locked in time suggests time might be more fluid in that space than we think, that the normal rules don't apply there. Could they somehow reverse the initial opening? Could they prevent the wormhole from ever forming in the first place, creating a timeline where none of this ever happened? It would create all sorts of paradoxes and temporal complications, but this is a show with psychic powers and alternate dimensions. Time travel isn't that much more of a stretch comparatively. Interestingly, when they film big productions like this, they sometimes shoot fake scenes just to throw off spoilers and leaks. Tom Holland famously thought he was filming a scene for Tony Stark's wedding in Avengers. Endgame only to find out later during post-production that it was actually Tony's funeral. The Duffer Brothers could absolutely be doing something similar with the Stranger Things. Those leaked set photos that suggest Eleven dies might be deliberate misdirection, fake scenes, shot specifically to mislead fans who track every detail of production. Some fans have theorised that Vecna isn't the real villain, that the Mind Flayer is actually controlling him, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, that the finale will reveal Henry has been a puppet this whole time, manipulated by something even older and more powerful. The Duffer Brothers have confirmed that the relationship between Vecna and the Mind Flayer will be explained in the finale definitively. So that question is definitely getting answered. Whether it's the twist people are expecting or something completely different, we'll know soon. Then there's the cave in Camazotz that Holly and Max discovered. Holly theorised it represents a traumatic memory that Henry fears, something from his past that he's buried deep and doesn't want to confront. What if that cave contains something crucial to defeating him? A weakness, a secret about Henry's past that could be used against him, some formative trauma that's the key to his psychology? The fact that it's been emphasised so much suggests it'll be important somehow, that Chekhov's gun principle applies. I've also seen this really interesting theory that Eleven could flip the upside down instead of destroying it. Turn it into a place of light and healing rather than darkness and death. Transform it instead of eliminating it. It's a more hopeful interpretation, and it would fit with themes of redemption and transformation that the show has explored throughout its run. What's wild to consider is that even if they defeat Vecna and close the upside down, the government still wins in some ways. Dr. K could escape with blood samples or data from her experiments. The program could continue even after the supernatural threat is eliminated. That would be a darker ending, more realistic maybe, where they save the world from the monsters, but the human threat remains unchanged. Or, and hear me out, what if it's actually a happy ending? What if everybody lives and they defeat Vecna without major casualties? The finale is releasing on New Year's Eve, which is traditionally a hopeful time, a celebration. New beginnings, fresh starts, looking forward rather than dwelling on loss. Maybe the Duffer Brothers don't want to start 2026 with millions of people crying over a devastating finale. To be honest, I think the most likely twist is that Eleven agrees to sacrifice herself. The plan is set in motion, but something changes at the last second. Someone or something intervenes. The group finds another way, a solution nobody anticipated. Because after everything these characters have been through, after all the trauma and loss and pain, they deserve a chance at happiness, don't they? One of the biggest mysteries left hanging over the entire show is something we've been wondering about since season 2. What's the actual deal with the Mind Flayer? What is it, really, and how does it relate to Vecna? The Mind Flayer was introduced as this massive shadow creature in season 2, this incomprehensible entity. It possessed will, used him as a spy, and seemed to be the ultimate intelligence behind the Upside Down, the controlling consciousness. In season 3, it took on a physical form using melted humans in a grotesque display, creating that horrific flesh monster that terrorized Hawkins. It was disgusting and terrifying, and seemed unstoppable until 11 closed the gate and cut off its power source. Then season 4 complicated everything we thought we understood. We learned that Henry Creel found the Mind Flayer in the Abyss after 11 banished him there as a child. There's a flashback sequence where young Henry encounters these floating particles, this swirling consciousness in that red wasteland. He seems to shape it, mould it with his powers, into the spider-like form we recognise from later seasons. But the show deliberately left it ambiguous whether Henry created the Mind Flayer from raw material or just found it and formed a partnership with an existing entity. That distinction matters enormously for understanding the cosmology and the true nature of the threat. If Henry created the Mind Flayer, then he's the ultimate villain, the source of everything, the architect of all the suffering. But if the Mind Flayer already existed as a conscious entity and Henry is just its puppet or its lieutenant, then there's something even more dangerous lurking in the abyss. Something older and more powerful than Vecna, something that's been waiting for millennia for a way into our world. The Duffer Brothers confirmed to Variety that this question will be answered definitively in the final episode. Not in Volume 2, not in a post-credit scene, but in the actual finale itself. They've been holding on to this information for years, keeping it back as one of the last major reveals, the final piece of the puzzle. What we know for certain is that the Mind Flayer is connected to the hive mind that links all the creatures together. It's the intelligence that connects all the creatures from the abyss. The Demogorgons, the Demodogs, the Demobats, the Vines, even Will when he was possessed. They're all connected to this central consciousness, this networked intelligence. When Vecna uses the 12 children as vessels, he's probably tapping into that same hive mind network, amplifying his connection to it through their combined psychic potential. Apparently, in early planning documents, the Duffer Brothers had this whole mythology worked out in extraordinary detail. That 20-page document they wrote for Netflix detailed the relationship between Henry, the Mind Flayer, and the Abyss with scientific and narrative precision. They knew where this was going from the beginning, from the very first pitch meeting. They just waited until the right moment to reveal it to the audience. My personal theory is that Henry found the Mind Flayer rather than created it. It feels more threatening that way, more cosmically horrifying. The idea that the Abyss contains ancient intelligences that predate human civilization by eons, and Henry is just the latest being to make contact with them, to become their tool or their partner, it would make Vecna less of a singular villain and more of a symptom of something larger and more unknowable, something that will exist long after he's gone. But we won't know for sure until December 31st. After years of speculation and theory crafting and endless debates on Reddit and Twitter, we're finally going to get the definitive answer about the relationship between Vecna and the Mind Flayer. Speaking of characters returning from the past, we need to talk about someone I honestly didn't expect to see again in any capacity. Because apparently Barb Holland is back. At least her body is. Sort of. Barb died all the way back in Season 1, Episode 3. She was Nancy's best friend, the loyal one who went to Steve's party reluctantly and ended up getting dragged into the Upside Down by a Demogorgon. Her death was quick, brutal, and for a long time, nobody even knew she was missing. The show moved on pretty quickly from Barb, focusing on Will's rescue instead, treating her as a tragic but minor casualty. But the internet did not move on, not even close. The Justice for Barb movement became this massive thing, a cultural phenomenon. People were furious that Nancy's best friend got killed off so casually, that the show didn't give her death proper weight or significance, that she was basically forgotten while everyone celebrated Will coming home safe. Barb became a symbol for all the overlooked characters, the ones who don't get to be heroes or survivors, the supporting characters who die, to motivate the main cast. Shannon Purser, who played Barb, became a breakout star from that one brief role, leveraging it into a successful career. The Duffer Brothers have acknowledged over the years that they underestimated how much people would care about Barb, how her death would resonate with audiences. They've said in multiple interviews that if they'd known, they might have handled her death differently, given it more screen time, made it more significant to the plot rather than a quick casualty. Now, apparently, we're getting some closure on her story. The Duffer Brothers confirmed in a Time magazine article that Barb's body will appear in Season 5, Volume 2. She's likely part of Vecna's hive, that collection of victims he's kept over the years, preserved in the Upside Down. It makes sense given the timeline when you think about it. Barb died in the Upside Down in 1983, her body left there, never properly recovered or buried. Vecna would have found it eventually during his decades of building power. He keeps his victims in some form, trophies or components of his hive mind network. What's interesting is why they're bringing her back now, after all this time. It's not just fan service, though that's probably part of the motivation. Barb's appearance ties directly into Nancy's storyline and her character arc. Nancy has carried guilt about Barb's death for years, genuine survivor's guilt. In Season 4, when Vecna showed Nancy visions of her worst fears, Barb was there, prominently. The guilt, the sense of responsibility, the feeling that she abandoned her best friend for a boy, and that choice led directly to Barb's death. That trauma is still raw for Nancy after all these years, still unprocessed and unresolved. Seeing Barb's body in Vecna's hive would be absolutely devastating for her emotionally. It would force her to confront that guilt one final time, to face what she's been running from. And maybe, hopefully, in defeating Vecna and destroying the Hive, Nancy can finally let Barb rest, get the closure she's needed since season 1. The justice for Barb. Hashtag trended multiple times across different seasons, a testament to how much people connected with this minor character. People just couldn't let it go, couldn't accept that she was forgotten. And now, finally, the show is acknowledging that loss in a concrete way, giving her story an ending. Barb's return is bittersweet, but it feels like the show finally acknowledging what fans have said. For years, she mattered, her death mattered, and she deserves to be remembered as more than just a plot device. But Barb isn't the only dead character fans are hoping to see. Let's talk about Eddie Munson, because even though he's definitely, unquestionably dead, fans refuse to accept it or let him go. Eddie Munson was introduced in season 4 and immediately became a fan favourite, beloved by the audience. Joseph Quinn's performance was magnetic, captivating every moment he was on screen. Eddie was this metalhead dungeon master who got framed for murders he didn't commit, went on the run with the kids, and ended up sacrificing himself in the Upside Down to save Hawkins. His final scene playing Master of Puppets on guitar while Demobats swarmed around him was genuinely one of the most iconic moments in the entire series, an image that will be remembered long after the show ends. Then he died from his injuries, and fans absolutely lost their minds in collective grief. The thing is, people don't want to accept that Eddie is gone permanently. They've been theorising about ways he could come back ever since season 4 ended, crafting elaborate scenarios. The most popular theory involves Cass, the betrayer from Dungeons and Dragons lore. In D&D, Cass was Vecna's most trusted lieutenant who eventually betrayed him. Cass became a vampire after being defeated by Vecna, rising as an undead creature. So the theory goes that Eddie could return as some kind of undead servant, maybe controlled by Vecna initially, and then turn against him at a crucial moment, fulfilling the Cass role. It's a cool theory, honestly. It would fit perfectly with the D&D references that Stranger Things loves to make. Eddie's death happened in the Upside Down. His body was left there. Vecna could theoretically do something with it, use his powers to reanimate it, or bind Eddie's consciousness to it. The pieces are there for a supernatural resurrection if the writers wanted to go that route, but the Duffer brothers have confirmed multiple times in multiple interviews that Eddie is really dead, not coming back. His story is complete. His sacrifice was meaningful and final, a hero's death. Bringing him back would undermine that heroic moment and cheapen his death, make it less significant. Joseph Quinn has moved on to other projects, landed major roles in films. By all accounts, Eddie Munson's story is over, his chapter closed. That doesn't stop fans from hoping, though, from crafting theories and what-ifs. Some think he might appear in a flashback or a vision, not alive but present in some form. Dustin is still grieving Eddie heavily in season 5, the wound still fresh. In volume 2, Dustin and Steve have that big emotional fight, where Dustin breaks down about losing Eddie. So maybe we'll see Eddie in Dustin's memories, or in some kind of hallucination Vecna creates, not alive but present in spirit, a ghost that haunts the narrative. To be honest, I get why fans want him back so desperately. That guitar scene was genuinely one of the best moments in the show's history, transcendent television. Eddie deserved more than 4 episodes, deserved to survive and join the core group, but sometimes characters leave an impact precisely because their time is limited, because they burn bright and fast. Eddie's death meant something profound. It was heroic and selfless and tragic in the best narrative sense. Bringing him back would dilute that emotional impact, make it less powerful. Eddie's probably not coming back in any meaningful way, but his impact on the show and the fans is permanent, undeniable, and that's its own kind of immortality, isn't it? With all these theories about death and darkness and sacrifice, we need to ask the bigger, more fundamental question. Can Stranger Things actually have a happy ending? Is that even possible given everything that's happened? It's a fair question because the show has always walked this careful line between hope and tragedy. It's never been grimdark, never been relentlessly bleak like some prestige dramas, but it's also never shied away from real loss and pain, from the cost of heroism. So where does the finale land on that spectrum between tragedy and triumph? If we look at the pattern of how previous seasons ended, there's a consistent tone that emerges, bittersweet, neither completely tragic nor entirely happy. Season 1 ended with 11 seemingly dead, but the gate closed and Will home safe. Season 2 ended with Bob Newby dead, but the Mind Flayer expelled from Will and the gate sealed. Season 3 ended with Hopper seemingly dead, but the kids surviving and the Russian facility destroyed. Season 4 ended with Max in a coma, but Vecna wounded and the group reunited, ready to fight. There's always a cost to victory, always a sacrifice or loss, but there's also always hope persisting, the sense that the fight was worth it, even if the price was high. The show never ends on complete despair or nihilistic darkness. It finds that delicate balance between acknowledging loss and affirming that resistance matters, that love and friendship can survive even the darkest circumstances. What's interesting about the finale releasing on New Year's Eve is the symbolism of that specific date. New Year's Eve is about transitions by its very nature, endings and beginnings happening simultaneously, closing one chapter and opening another. It's traditionally a hopeful time, a celebration, looking forward rather than backward, making resolutions and setting intentions. Would the Duffer Brothers really want millions of people to start 2026 crying over a devastating finale? Or would they want it to send people into the new year with something more uplifting, more affirming of life and possibility? Some fans have latched onto this timing as evidence that the ending will be happier than expected, more optimistic. The whole everybody lives theory. Vecna dies, the upside down closes, and somehow all our favourite characters make it through intact. No major deaths, no heartbreaking sacrifices, just a clean victory and a chance for everyone to finally have normal lives. I honestly can't see them going that route though. The stakes are too high at this point. The setup has been too intense, too carefully constructed. A completely happy ending where nobody dies would feel unearned at this stage, anticlimactic even. The audience has been prepared for loss, for sacrifice, for difficult choices. But the Duffer Brothers have said things in interviews that suggest they're not going for gratuitous tragedy either, not trying to maximise emotional damage just for the sake of it. Matt Duffer told reporters that he hopes by the time people get to the end, it feels like there's something inevitable about what happens. Not shocking for shock's sake, but right for the story, true to the characters. Ross Duffer echoed that sentiment, saying they've been working on this ending for 3 years, and it felt right to let it go when they did. Sean Levy, one of the producers, has talked about sticking the landing, about giving the story and the characters the ending they deserve, rather than the ending that would generate the most headlines. That language suggests they're being thoughtful about it, deliberate, not just going for maximum emotional damage, but trying to find something that feels earned and appropriate. The show's influences also matter here when considering possibilities. The Duffer Brothers have always drawn heavily from 1980s movies in their storytelling approach, and a lot of those films had hopeful endings, even when they dealt with dark themes. The Goonies, E.T., Stand By Me. These are films about kids growing up, facing darkness and danger, and coming through it, changed but intact. They're about the end of innocence, certainly, but also about the resilience of friendship and love, the things that endure even when everything else falls apart. That's kind of what Stranger Things has always been about too at its core. Kids forced to grow up too fast, facing horrors no child should face, but surviving through the power of their connections to each other. My guess, and it's only a guess, is that the ending will be bittersweet, leaning slightly more toward hope than tragedy. Some characters might die, probably Carly at minimum, given the narrative setup. There will be loss and grief and pain, but the core group, the original party who started this journey in season 1, they'll survive. They'll get to grow up, move forward, have futures. They'll get their chance at normal lives, even if those lives are forever marked by what they've been through, forever changed by the trauma and the heroism. It won't be a fairy tale ending with everything perfect, but it won't be nihilistic either. Won't suggest that none of it mattered or that the cost was too high. It'll be honest, emotional, and hopefully satisfying in a way that honours everything these characters and this story have meant to people over the years, the impact it's had on popular culture. Speaking of happy endings and future possibilities, we need to talk about Mike and Eleven specifically, because after 4 seasons of their relationship being tested and complicated and pulled apart by circumstances, their future together feels genuinely uncertain. Mike and Eleven have been the emotional core of Stranger Things since the very first season. She was the strange girl with no hair and incredible powers who didn't understand the world. He was the kid who took her in without hesitation, protected her, taught her what friendship meant, showed her kindness when everyone else saw her as dangerous or valuable. Their relationship evolved from that initial connection into genuine love as they grew up. But it's never been easy or simple. She's had to hide constantly, run away, move across the country. He struggled to express his feelings, to be vulnerable, to say the words, "I love you," even when it mattered most desperately. In season 4, Mike finally got there emotionally. When Eleven was losing her fight against Vecna, when she was literally dying, Mike poured his heart out completely. He told her he loved her, told her she was his superhero, that she'd always been the most extraordinary person he'd ever known. And that confession, that raw vulnerability, gave Eleven the strength to fight back, to survive. It saved her life. It was this massive character moment for both of them. Now, in Volume 2, they have this conversation about the future that's both beautiful and heartbreaking to witness. Mike talks about moving somewhere together after all this is over, somewhere peaceful with at least one waterfall. It's such a specific, unusual detail, and it feels significant in its specificity. Not just anywhere, but somewhere, with natural beauty, with falling water. Somewhere they can heal from all of this, build a life together, away from the constant danger and government surveillance and psychic battles. The waterfall represents everything they've never had. Stability, peace, normalcy, the ability to just be 2 people in love without the weight of the world on their shoulders. It's the dream of a regular life that Eleven has never experienced and Mike has been fighting to protect, to make possible. But that conversation now feels like tragic foreshadowing, because Eleven might not survive to see any waterfalls. She might sacrifice herself as Cali suggested. Or even if she lives physically, can she ever really be free? As long as she exists with her powers intact, the government will hunt her relentlessly. Dr. K won't stop voluntarily. Someone else will take Dr. K's place eventually. The cycle continues indefinitely unless Eleven removes herself from the equation permanently. Matt Duffer said in interviews that Mike becomes the leader again this season, but in a more confident and mature version than in season 1. He's grown up significantly, developed real leadership skills. He's not the kid who panicked when Eleven disappeared anymore. He's someone who can hold the group together through crisis, make hard decisions under pressure, be strong when others need him to be strong. But can he be strong enough to lose Eleven? Can he survive that emotionally? Can any of them rebuild? If she's gone, I really want them to get their happy ending, honestly. They've earned it through suffering. Both of them have sacrificed so much, been through so much trauma that would break most people. The idea of them never getting that peaceful life together, never seeing that waterfall Mike imagined, is genuinely heartbreaking to contemplate. But Stranger Things rarely gives easy happiness or wish fulfillment. It gives hard-won survival. It gives bittersweet victories where you win but lose something precious in the process. It gives characters who carry their scars but keep moving forward anyway. Whether Mike and Eleven end up together, whether they both survive, whether that waterfall is a dream deferred or a promise broken, we'll know very soon. But whatever happens, their relationship has been one of the most compelling parts of this entire series, central to what makes the show emotionally resonant. And speaking of characters who deserve better than they've gotten, we absolutely need to talk about Steve Harrington one more time. Because if he dies in this finale, the internet will genuinely riot. And I mean that literally. Steve's transformation from season 1 to now is genuinely one of the best character arcs in the entire series, perhaps in television generally. He started as the stereotypical jock boyfriend, the popular kid who was kind of a jerk, more concerned with his image and social status than anything meaningful. Then Nancy broke up with him, and instead of becoming the villain of the story like we expected, Steve became a hero. By season 2, he was babysitting Dustin and fighting demodogs with a nail-covered baseball bat. By season 3, he was working at Scoops Ahoy and developing this incredible friendship with Robin that transcended typical relationships. By season 4, he was basically the group's protector and guardian, the one who jumps into danger first without hesitation, who takes the hits so the kids don't have to. His arc from selfish teenager to selfless guardian has been beautiful to watch unfold. His relationship with Dustin is particularly special, evolved into something profound. It evolved into something like a father figure or older brother dynamic that's incredibly touching. They bicker and tease each other constantly, but there's genuine love there, genuine care. Dustin looks up to Steve immensely. Steve sees something of himself in Dustin, the kid he might have been if he'd been a little less cool and a little more nerdy, which makes Volume 2 so painful to watch unfold. In that episode called Shock Jock, Steve and Dustin get into an actual physical fight, not playful wrestling, but a real altercation. They're fighting about Eddie, about heroism, about fear of loss. Dustin is still grieving intensely, still processing the loss of his friend who died being a hero, and he's terrified it's going to happen again with Steve, that history will repeat itself. He can't lose another person he cares about to heroic sacrifice. He can't survive that. The fight ends with Dustin breaking down completely, sobbing, saying he can't lose Steve after already losing Eddie. And Steve finally understands what's been driving Dustin's behaviour. He hugs Dustin tightly and they reconcile. It's this incredibly emotional moment that shows how much they mean to each other, how their bond has deepened. But then there's that line, that terrible, ominous line, "You die, I die." It's said between them in what feels like a moment of solidarity, of commitment to each other. But in television language, that kind of line is usually ominous foreshadowing. It's the show telling us that one or both of them might not make it, preparing us for loss. Joe Keery has been branching out into other projects recently, including his music career, where he's become a legitimate musician under the name Joe. He's released albums, gone on tour. Some people have speculated that his reduced screen time in the Season 5 trailers might suggest a smaller role or an early exit from the story, death coming sooner than expected. To be honest, if Steve dies, I'll be absolutely devastated. His character has become so beloved that his death would hit harder than almost anyone else's. Maybe harder than Eleven's, because we're not expecting it as much. The nail bat, the hair, the babysitter energy, all of it has made Steve Harrington into an icon of the show. One Reddit user predicted confidently that Steve will continue being a living legend, survive against the odds. I really hope they're right. Steve has survived impossible odds before. He's been beaten up more times than anyone can count, taken more physical punishment than seems survivable. He's fought monsters, Russian soldiers, and his own insecurities. Surely he can survive one more battle. But the setup is definitely there for a heroic sacrifice if the Duffers want to use it. The reconciliation with Dustin, the "you die, I die" commitment, the complete arc from jerk to hero. If they wanted to give Steve a meaningful death that honours his journey, all the pieces are in place narratively. I'm just really hoping they don't take that path. Steve deserves his future too, deserves to figure out who he is beyond the fighting and the protecting. So how does this final battle actually play out? We've got all the pieces on the board, all the characters in position. Now we just need to figure out how they move, how the end game unfolds. The finale is over 2 hours long, which is basically a feature film in terms of runtime. That's a massive amount of time for a single television episode, unprecedented for the show. And it suggests the battle sequence itself is going to be absolutely epic in scope, sprawling across locations and dimensions. Frank Darabont is directing the finale, which is pretty significant when you think about his body of work. He's known for The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, films about hope persisting in dark circumstances. But he also directed some of the best episodes of The Walking Dead, so he knows how to handle large-scale action with genuine emotional weight. Ross Duffer said in an interview that this is the most eventful episode in the entire series, which is saying something given how intense some of the previous finales have been. The scale doesn't go down, he said. It only gets bigger and more intense as the story races toward its conclusion. I think the episode will open with the teams splitting up, the calm before the storm. They've made their plan, said their goodbyes, shared whatever final moments they need to, and now it's time to execute, to put everything on the line. Eleven and Cali will enter Camazotz together, probably through some kind of psychic projection ritual. While their bodies remain protected in the Upside Down, guarded by others, their consciousness will travel into Vecna's mindscape. They'll navigate through whatever horrors he's constructed there, making their way toward the Creel house where he's conducting the ceremony. Meanwhile, the rescue team uses Steve's beanstalk path to reach the abyss. That sequence is probably going to be visually stunning and terrifying in equal measure. Imagine climbing through this massive organic structure that connects dimensions, surrounded by the red wasteland of the abyss, with demogorgons or worse creatures lurking in the distance. They'll reach the Creel house from the physical side and start extracting the children's bodies one by one, moving quickly but carefully. Dustin's demolition team will be positioning the explosives around the exotic matter sphere. That's probably going to require some technical problem solving on the fly, classic Dustin figuring out the science under pressure. Maybe the sphere is more unstable than they thought. Maybe it's protected by something they didn't anticipate. There's always a complication that wasn't in the plan. And here's where things start going wrong, because they always do in these situations. Maybe the military shows up at the worst possible moment. Dr. K could interfere, trying to capture 11 even in the middle of the apocalypse, unable to see beyond her objectives. Maybe Vecna senses their presence in his domain and sends creatures to stop them. Maybe the timing gets thrown off and the teams lose communication with each other, forced to improvise. Inside Camazotz, Eleven and Cali confront Vecna during his ceremony. The 12 children are still channeling their power to him, their eyes rolled back, completely under his control. Cali uses her illusions to break his concentration, to make him question reality. Maybe she makes him see his own fears, his trauma from childhood, the things he's tried to bury and forget. While he's distracted and vulnerable, Eleven hits him with everything she's got, raw telekinetic force, accumulated over years. But Vecna has been planning this for decades. He's not going down easy. There's probably a massive psychic battle where reality itself seems to warp and break, where the boundaries between dimensions blur. Will might tap into the hive mind to help 11, giving her crucial information or weakening Vecna's control over the vessels. Max and Holly, now freed from their mental prisons, might play a role in saving the other children, helping them break free. The rescue team gets everyone out just as the wormhole starts destabilizing, reality beginning to collapse. Maybe there's a moment where someone gets left behind or nearly left behind, creating that last-second tension we need. Dustin detonates the explosives. The exotic matter sphere shatters spectacularly. The bridge between worlds begins to collapse, the Upside Down starting to vanish. And this is where the sacrifice moment happens, whatever form it takes. Whether it's Eleven and Cali choosing to stay behind, or someone else making an unexpected choice, or maybe they find another way at the last second that nobody anticipated. The Upside Down vanishes, taking whatever or whoever is still inside with it into oblivion. The abyss is sealed off from Earth permanently, then the aftermath, the immediate reactions. Who made it out? Who didn't? What's left of Hawkins? How do they pick up the pieces of their lives? The finale is going to be epic, emotional, and probably devastating in ways we're not fully prepared for despite all our speculation. But at least we'll finally know how it all ends, how this story concludes after nearly a decade. The technical question of how they actually close the Upside Down forever is fascinating when you think about the mechanics. Because they've tried this before, and it didn't stick, didn't create a permanent solution. In Season 1, Eleven closed the gate by channeling all her power into sealing it. She succeeded, but it cost her everything. She disappeared, seemingly died, and the gate stayed closed for about a year. But it wasn't permanent. The gate could be reopened because the underlying connection between dimensions still existed. The infrastructure remained intact. Season 2 was similar in outcome. Will had to be purged of the Mind Flayer's influence through that heating procedure, and then 11 closed the gate at Hawkins' lab. Again, massive psychic force, total exhaustion, but it worked temporarily. The gate sealed, except again, not permanently. Season 4 proved that because Vecna was able to open multiple gates all over Hawkins, creating that four-way split that tore the town apart. The problem with those previous closings is that they were treating symptoms, not the underlying cause. They were sealing doorways without destroying the bridge itself. As long as the wormhole existed, as long as that connection between Earth and the abyss remained intact, gates could always be opened again by someone with enough power and knowledge. Dustin's plan is fundamentally different in approach. He's not trying to close a gate or seal a doorway. He's trying to destroy the infrastructure itself, the foundation. The exotic matter sphere is what stabilizes the wormhole, keeps it open and functional as a passage. It's the anchor point holding everything together. Destroy that anchor, and the bridge collapses entirely, ceases to exist. The upside down, which is just the wormhole made manifest as a physical space, would vanish, disappear completely. But what happens to the abyss itself in this scenario? That dimension doesn't go away. It's still out there, still existing as its own realm in whatever multiverse structure exists. It just becomes unreachable from Earth, separated permanently. No bridge, no passage, no way to cross between the two realities. Any creatures still in the abyss when the wormhole collapses stay trapped there permanently, unable to reach our world. That includes Vecna, if he's still alive when it happens, if he survives 11's assault. What's really interesting is whether 11 and Cali's sacrifice is actually necessary for this to work, or if it's just Cali's assumption. Cali believes that as long as they exist, the government will find a way to recreate the bridge, to reopen the connection using their blood or DNA or powers. But is she right? Could Dustin's bomb work without them dying? Or is there some psychic component to maintaining the seal that requires permanent presence, a consciousness holding the door closed forever? Will's connection to the Upside Down would presumably sever when the wormhole collapses. He's been tied to it since 1983, able to sense the mind flayer, tap into the hive mind, feel when something is wrong. Losing that connection could be painful, like amputating a limb that's been part of you for years. Or it could be a relief, freedom from something that's haunted him. The scars on Hawkins won't disappear regardless. That four-way split, the damage to buildings and infrastructure, the military occupation, those are physical remnants that will take years to repair. And the psychological damage to everyone who lived through this, that's permanent too. They'll carry it forever. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure even destroying the exotic matter is sufficient to end the threat permanently. But it's the best plan they've got, the only option that addresses the root cause. And sometimes that has to be good enough. So let's say they win. Let's say they close the Upside Down and survive. What happens next? What does the future look like? The immediate aftermath is going to be chaos, obviously. Cleanup, medical attention, figuring out who made it and who didn't. Reunions and grief happening simultaneously. The military will still be there, still a threat, unless Dr. K is dealt with permanently and the program exposed. Hawkins will be scarred, literally torn apart by those gates. Rebuilding will take years, maybe decades. But beyond that immediate crisis, what does the future look like for these characters who've been through hell? The timeline is fall, 1987. Mike, Will, Lucas, Dustin, and 11 are all around 16 or 17 years old. Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve are in their early 20s. These aren't kids anymore. Not really. They're at the age where life decisions start to matter significantly. College applications, career paths, relationships, all of that is right around the corner. I think we'll probably see a time jump of some kind. Maybe just a few weeks to show immediate recovery, people beginning to heal, or maybe months or even a year to show how everyone has adjusted to life after the Upside Down, after the monsters are gone. The Duffers love using time as a storytelling device, and a flash forward would let them show the long-term impact of everything that happened, the ways people change or don't change. Mike and Eleven, if they both survive, might finally get their peaceful life somewhere. Maybe not immediately with everything still chaotic, but eventually they could have that future Mike imagined. Whether that includes a waterfall specifically, we'll see. Will deserves to just be a normal teenager for once, to explore who he is without monsters and mindscapes and trauma, defining every aspect of his existence. Lucas and Max, if she makes it through, have earned their happiness too after everything they've endured. Steve's future is interesting to consider. He's talked about not getting into college, about working retail jobs, about not knowing what comes next in his life. But maybe after saving the world multiple times, he figures it out, finds something that matters to him. Or maybe he becomes a Hawkins legend, the guy who fought monsters and lived to tell about it. The group staying together versus drifting apart is the real question that will define the ending. Growing up means people go their separate ways sometimes. It's natural, inevitable. But these kids have been through something that bonds them forever, trauma that connects them in ways most people can't understand. Whether they stay in constant contact or drift apart geographically while remaining connected emotionally, that's what the finale will show us, the final image will carry forward. Just because the main story ends doesn't mean we're done with Hawkins, though. Netflix isn't ready to let go of Stranger Things just yet. Not when it's such a massive property. There's a confirmed animated spin-off in development called Stranger Things, Tales from the Upside Down, or possibly just Tales from 85. It's going to be an anthology series set in 1985, right in the middle of the Stranger Things timeline, specifically between seasons 2 and 3, apparently. The format sounds like it'll explore different stories and characters within that year, maybe showing what other towns were dealing with while Hawkins dealt with its problems, or focusing on side characters we didn't spend much time with in the main show, giving them their moments. What's interesting is that 1985 was a relatively quiet year in the main storyline. The gate was closed after season 2, the Mind Flayer was expelled from Will. Things seemed okay for a while before the Russians showed up secretly in season 3, so there's room to tell stories that don't directly impact what we already know happened, stories that can exist in the margins without contradicting established canon. The Duffer Brothers have been pretty clear that the main story is complete. They've said repeatedly that this really is the end of Eleven, Mike, Lucas, Dustin, Steve, and all those characters we've followed. There's no season 6 planned, no continuation of their story beyond this finale. The ending we're getting on December 31st is final, but the world can continue in other forms. The mythology they've built, the idea of the upside down, empowered individuals and government experiments, that's bigger than just Hawkins. Other labs existed throughout the country. Other towns might have had strange incidents we never heard about. There's potential for stories that expand the universe without retreading the same ground. There's also The First Shadow, the prequel play that's been running in London and explores young Henry Creel's story in the 1950s. Matt Duffer mentioned that the finale has more overlap with the play than earlier episodes, revealing things they deliberately held back so they could show them on screen first. Stranger Things has been viewed over 1 billion times across all seasons according to Netflix data. They know it's a massive property, perhaps their biggest. They're going to continue mining it for content in whatever ways make sense commercially and creatively. Just hopefully in ways that respect what made the original special, what made people connect with it so deeply. And that, my friends, is where we'll end tonight's deep dive into finale predictions and possibilities. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground. The current state of the story after Volume 2, the Upside Down reveals about wormholes and dimensions, Eleven's potential sacrifice, death predictions for basically everyone, plot twists we might not see coming, and what the actual final battle might look like. Whether I'm right or completely off base in these predictions, we'll find out together very soon. On December 31st at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, the finale drops on Netflix. The finale is over 2 hours long, a feature film, essentially, and it'll be screening in theatres simultaneously with the Netflix release if you want that theatrical experience with a crowd. Over 350 theatres across the US and Canada are participating in these special screenings. In a future video, I'm definitely going to do a post-finale breakdown once we've all processed what actually happens. There's going to be so much to unpack, so many theories to revisit, so many emotions to work through together. But until that time comes, I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of possibilities. I hope these theories have given you something to think about as you drift off to sleep. Sweet dreams to you all, and I genuinely can't wait to see how the Duffer Brothers actually end this story we've been following for nearly a decade. Thank you for spending this time with me at Quiet Theories. Rest well, and I'll see you in the next video.